All right, so welcome to another trading video. Today, what I'm going to do is share with you some insight about why you should not listen to trading gurus or trading tips, including some of the things that I talk about. And this is just kind of a warning sign for you to really just open you up on what's going on, what's happening behind the scenes, and give you some insight and kind of also the reasoning behind why I also share some of these insights. Ultimately, when you go in and you see different YouTube videos or things, you might see stuff like this, top 7 hot stocks to watch for June. You might have seen 3 popular stocks I would not buy. And then there's a lot of other people that'll post these kinds of things, much more so in a pump fashion, which we'll talk about in a bit. But ultimately for me, the reason I post these things is just to give you some clarity as far as, hey, these are some things I'm watching, not necessarily getting into and not necessarily ones I'm trading. In addition, the way that I trade is a lot different than what most other people trade. You know, there's a lot of people, what they do is they go in and they'll trade stocks and they'll just buy simply on the kind of upside. So you're just buying a stock and you're looking for it to kind of head higher, and that is it. However, in the industry I'm in, I do a lot of option coaching and trading, and we might set up spreads where they're like iron condors, there might be butterflies. There's just different constructions that you can do for the trades. It might be just a simple vertical there that you go in and you're looking for the stock to head higher, or even looking for it to kind of burn out some of that theta decay. So it's much different than, you know, a lot of the 90% of the other investors. Now, one thing I will warn you about is that there's other people out there, and they might not do it intentionally, but on the YouTube space, what they do is they do a thing called a pump and dump. And the way this works is they might recommend a stock here and say, hey, I love, this is my number one stock pick, okay? And then what happens is they're already in it right here. They bought some shares. Let's say they bought 2,000 shares. And now that stock slowly heads higher and they start recommending it. They talk about it. They might be talking about it for weeks. It could be for months. And if they have a big following, then, you know, that could drive the stock price higher. You know, you might say, oh, I'll buy 50 bucks worth. Another guy buys 50 shares. Another guy buys 100 shares. Another guy buys 1,000 shares. So with time, this continues to head higher. And then what they do is as that stock price inflates, then they get out right here, and they basically have dumped it to you, right? So all the people getting in up here are already late to the party, right? They might have already been getting in it way earlier, gotten in it, and they might not have done it in a bad form of intentions, but the fact is they're pumping it through their videos all the time. So if you see the same stock with the same people all the time, that's a pump. Okay, so if I see more than, let's say, 3 videos as a general rule on the same stock in a short period of time, and especially if the stock is less than $10, the reason for that is because it's easier to manipulate. Then they're pumping it to you. So they're pumping it up to you, and then they're going to later probably dump it, and you might be getting out when this is already going down here. You might be getting out way lower, and that's a bit of the issue and a big problem in these industries. So you need to be very mindful and be a little more careful. So when you start looking at these things, let's say we go in, and I don't even have stocks that are at those low levels, but let's just say this one, BBBY. So there's very few that I have that are super, super cheap. But this one, even this one is tough to manipulate. It's only got, you know, it's got 4 or 5 million shares here, 15 million shares. But there's other ones that are, you know, trade a lot less. Like here's one that's only 3 million shares. But if you start looking and doing like a scan for, let me see if I could find some, or I'll have to pull it up. Here, like this one, you know, trading 300, 400,000 shares. It's not a lot, but here's one, 300,000 shares, cheap stock. And these things can get manipulated very easily, very quickly. And what happens is somebody might be getting in it right here. Like let's say it's a YouTuber, and then they're pumping it for a month, and then slowly they're getting out of it, and you're getting in it right here. Yeah, the stock looks good, and then all of a sudden the stock starts tanking. So my point is that be very careful here on these kinds of things. Let me see. There's a Tattoo Chef that I heard a lot of recommendations about. So here, for example, you know, people will pump this thing, and they're just trying to get out ultimately. So what you have is just nonstop pumping here, pump, 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 pump. And then they're dumping, and you're trying to maybe get in, and you're already, you're kind of got in somewhere over here, and this thing just is tanking. So anyway, at the end of the day, your investment style and strategy is going to be different than my investment style and strategy. I might like to eat salads and fruit. You might like to eat burgers and hot dogs. Everybody's a little different. So when I go in and I share with you some insight of, hey, watch these stocks, keep an eye on them. It might be something to learn from the charts. It might be something to keep an eye on because there might be something going on. It's not necessarily a recommendation to buy, sell, or trade those stocks. In my case, I'm watching them. It could be a good shorting opportunity. It could be a good iron condor opportunity. So if I start looking at just the way that these things are set up, I might have a lot of different positions, but it's not just buying straight out stocks. Like, for example, let's take a look at maybe Home Depot over here. If I look at Home Depot, I might have vertical spreads here. So if I take a look at this is a vertical spread. It's not necessarily just buying the shares. So it functions and behaves a lot different than, the average person. So as I'm watching this, we might be doing a whole different kind of trade. You can see right here, it just functions and behaves different because we're getting a theta and time decay and time value. We're not looking for just appreciation. Let's say here's Goldman Sachs with a butterfly, I think. Let me see if this one is functioning in that way. Yeah, so this butterfly is functioning a bit different. I think it's like overblown anyway. But here, this is a butterfly spread that now we're just taking to full expiration because it just overshot it. But it's a $1,300 position. But its construction is different than just buying the straight out shares. Anyway, my point here is that be very careful and mindful when there's recommendations of the stock, especially a cheap one. And somebody's pumping it like 3-4 times per week or per day, or they're always talking about it. That's really just, it's a classic sign of pump and dump. It's a classic sign, even though they might not even think or be aware that they're doing it. That's just the nature of the business, is that they go in, they start recommending it. The stock starts heading higher. They're already in it. You get in it here, and then the stock starts rolling over maybe a few weeks later. And these people at the beginning are dumping or have dumped, and you're like holding on a losing position, and it's just a recipe for disaster. So be careful. Watch out. It's just something to be very careful about. And it's one of the reasons why you should stop, taking trading tips from newsletters and YouTube videos and those kinds of things. Use them as an educational basis, but not necessarily for specific trading ideas for, hey, the exact trade to do the same exact way. It might be more of, hey, let me check out that stock. I've never heard about it. Let me take a look at it. And then if it makes sense for you, then in that case, maybe you'll take a position. But as for doing the exact position at that exact same time, the same way, you're already late to the party, because by the time the video comes out or the newsletter comes out, people have already made decisions, investment ideas, and your investment risk tolerance is going to be a lot different. So be careful and don't take trading tips and advice from these kinds of things. Instead, use it as a learning basis to improve yourself in the future. All right. Thanks for joining me. I'll see you in the next video and episode.